Islanders in this year's draft, plus more on the recent dismissal of Barry Trotz, how that affects the Islanders, and a preview of tonight's Game 1 of the Islanders' second round playoff series, the Bridgeport Islanders series in the AHL playoffs. All that and more on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to this special live edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Gil Martin, so glad to be with you today as we talk all things Islanders, and thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. If you've got something Islanders related on your mind, feel free to send us an email. The email address, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. If you've got a question, a comment, maybe something you'd like us to talk about on a future episode, send us that email. If you leave your first name and where you're from, we are happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. You could also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date throughout the offseason on all things New York Islanders, from the draft, free agency, trade rumors, coaches, firings, all the things that have been going on. We'll have it all for you on Twitter and throughout the off season. Lots to discuss. The NHL draft lottery now history. It is over. And for the New York Islanders, no major changes. They came in with only a very small chance of moving up. In fact, they had about a 2.5% chance of moving from the 13th overall spot in this draft lottery. And they had a slightly bigger chance that someone would leapfrog them in the pecking order and move them back a spot or two. Because of the rule modifications done by the NHL, nobody could move up more than 10 spots. So even if the Islanders would have won the draft lottery, they would have only gone from picking 13th to picking either third or fourth, depending on if they won first or second place. Neither of those things happened. So the Islanders sticking in the 13th spot, that will be their first pick in this year's NHL entry draft. And look, they can do a lot of good things with the 13th pick. It's a good spot. And we will spend a lot of time over the offseason discussing some of the prospects the Islanders may be interested in and how they're going to build their team. So 13th is not a bad spot to be in as far as the first round of the NHL draft is concerned. It'll be interesting because when the new coach is finally hired, and we don't know yet who that's going to be, but when the new coach is hired, we will have a better idea of what that coach is looking for philosophically, what style of hockey they want to play. We know a few things when you talk about the draft lottery and the upcoming NHL draft. Number one, when you're drafting 18-year-old kids, you know that 95% of these players are not going to be in the NHL for at least 2 years, sometimes 3. And, only maybe the first handful of picks, first, second, third overall, are going to make their NHL debut at the age of 18. So much of the draft is about projecting how a 17 or 18-year-old prospect is going to be 3 years down the road when he's 20, 21, 22, and more mature physically, more mature mentally. It is a projection. And one thing you're almost never getting in the NHL draft, unlike the NFL and NBA drafts, is you're not getting immediate help. So hopefully the Islanders have their new coach in place before the draft, so the scouting department is aware of who exactly it is they want to draft. What kind of player does the new coach want? Now, we've discussed on the show several times about the needs that the Islanders have. Regardless of who the coach is, this team needs more goal scoring. They were 22nd in the NHL in goals scored. They struggled throughout the Barry Trotz era when it came to putting enough pucks in the net. And, so many of their better players are playmakers rather than being snipers or goal scorers. And, Matthew Barzal, Josh Bailey, Anthony Beauvillier, these are all pass first kind of players rather than shoot first kind of guys. Right now, the only two Islanders players who had 20 or more goals last year were Brock Nelson and Anders Lee. Both of them are 30 or older. So obviously, the Islanders not only need goal scoring talent, but they need to get younger in that department. That remains a major need for Lou Lamoriello to fill once the season gets underway. Meanwhile, the other need, and again, you're not usually going to get this kind of help for the upcoming season, but the Islanders definitely do need that puck-moving defenseman, the defenseman who can skate the puck out of the zone and help the team transition, and the type of player who can supplement Noah Dobson as a power play quarterback. Dobson is really the only puck-moving defenseman the Islanders have on their present roster. But again, you're talking about a prospect who probably won't help the team for 2 or 3 years at the earliest. So we have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Montreal Canadiens do have the first overall pick in the draft. The New Jersey Devils, a division rival of the Islanders, now move up to the second spot. Then it's the Arizona Coyotes, Seattle Kraken, and Philadelphia Flyers. So 2 of the top 5 teams in this year's NHL draft are Metropolitan Division rivals of the New York Islanders. And that is somebody, those are teams that may get a little bit of immediate help, or at least have a player on their roster who can contribute immediately. So we'll see how this one pans out. But the New York Islanders sticking in 13th, and that's where they will pick, barring a trade. And we know Lou Lamoriello, trades are always possible. He has not hesitated to trade first-round picks before. So we'll see what Lou Lamoriello does. But that's the ammunition he's got. 13th overall pick in this year's NHL entry draft. And like I said, we will preview that extensively between now and draft day to see what the Islanders do. We have got a lot more to discuss. The fallout from the Barry Trotz firing continues. We will go in depth as to what was behind it and some more thoughts about how that played out, plus the Bridgeport Islanders opening up their playoff series tonight, their second round AHL playoff series. We'll talk about that as well, and a lot more still to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You could save time and money while using Rock Auto. So why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you could need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even a new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So the fallout continues from the firing of Barry Trotz. And as we discussed on yesterday's show, kind of a surprise move, and it's something that, to me, it really puts the Islanders organization in a crossroads. And here's why. This team, as it is currently put together, is ideally put together for a Barry Trotz style of hockey. And, the defense first, tight checking, we're going to wear you down and take advantage of your mistakes. All of that is sort of built into the way this roster is built. And you add the fact that Barry Trotz liked to rely on veterans, that you have players like a Zach Parise, a Matt Martin, a Cal Clutterbuck, all of these guys who are all 30 plus, but that's who, Barry Trotz felt comfortable with. That's who he liked to rely on. That's not necessary or not necessarily going to be the case going forward. Will some of those players have less value in the new system once the Islanders, hire a new coach who's going to possibly play a different style? Now, if Lou Lamoriello decides, hey, Lane Lambert, he's been the assistant for a long time, we think he's ready to be a head coach, we're going to bring him in. Maybe the system doesn't change drastically, and you're in a situation where the roster doesn't have to change. But if the new coach, who the Islanders may hire, wants to play more of a speed game, for example, or wants to play more of a wide open style of hockey, that is not going to fit with the players on the present roster right away. And I think what we're going to see as a result of this coaching change, most likely, again, it does depend who they bring in, but one of the things we're going to see as a result of the coaching change is a lot of moves coming up this offseason so that the new coach can have more players that fit his philosophy of play going forward. If you're a fantasy hockey kind of player, guys like Anthony Beauvillier, if he remains with the Islanders, Matthew Barzal, certainly. These are players, Anders Lee, Brock Nelson. These are guys who could put up substantially better offensive numbers next year, especially if the shackles are taken off. The system is not necessarily as rigid under the new coach as it was under Barry Trotz. And, that could benefit these guys statistically and offensively. And I think hopefully what the Islanders are hoping to see from the new regime is that the goals against goes up by a nice amount, but the goals for goes up by a nice amount, but the goals against only goes down slightly, if at all. So that is sort of the challenge that the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello will face during the course of this offseason. But here's the other thing, and this is something I'm wondering about. And if you want to go back and listen to yesterday's show, the Monday show, we talked about, how I feel that Barry Trotz was not the main problem as far as why this Islander team struggled. There were a lot of factors. I think Barry Trotz could have done some things differently, but overall, I don't think he was the biggest reason, not even close to the biggest reason, that this team struggled the way they did this past season. Barry Trotz is considered one of the best coaches in the NHL today. He's third on the league's all-time coaching regular season wins list. If you replace him, you better have a plan. You better have somebody else in mind, because who are you going to get that's better than Barry Trotz? Sometimes Barry Trotz may not be the best fit for this particular team. Okay, you can make that argument. But in the 4 seasons that the Islanders had Trotz, they had a system. They stuck to it. They had winning seasons all 4 years, won at least one playoff series in the first 3 seasons Trotz was there, and went all the way to the conference final in 2 of those 3 seasons. So, this team right now, the way they're constituted is older. They're built to win now. You don't want to take a step back and say, okay, this will be a transition season and we hire the new guy and then in another year we'll be ready to roll. I hope that whatever they do doesn't result in this team being completely blown up and started over from scratch, because that's a rebuild, and I don't think this team is in that kind of a situation just yet. So we will constantly keep our eye on this as it develops and how the Islanders are handling things. But the coaching search continues, and the shock of the Barry Trotz firing also continues to affect us. Now, wanted to also discuss briefly the Islanders' Bridgeport AHL affiliate, their playoff series getting underway tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time in Bridgeport. They're taking on the Charlotte Checkers, who won the AHL's Atlantic Division. And this is round 2 of the playoffs, game 1 tonight at the Total Mortgage Arena in Bridgeport. It's a best 3 out of 5 series. The first 2 games are home games for the Islanders. So this is, they really need to do well. Now, Corey Schneider has been outstanding in goal. He stopped 75 out of 77 shots that he faced. So Schneider, the veteran, has come up big. And then you had the 2 overtime game-winning goals in the first round. The Islanders winning both games 2-1 against Providence. Arno Durando and Atu Rate getting those overtime game winners. Now, these 2 teams faced off 8 times during the regular season. Bridgeport going 4-3-0-1 in the 8 meetings against Charlotte. Charlotte going 4-4. So this is going to be an interesting series. Tuesday tonight and Thursday night are at home for Bridgeport, and then Saturday is in Charlotte at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Monday, if necessary, in Charlotte, and then Wednesday, if necessary, May 18th, will close things out in Charlotte. So big series. Hopefully some of the younger Islanders prospects, the Robin Salos, the Atu Rates, these are guys who, the Simon Holmstroms, these are guys who are going to get some valuable playoff experience and North American playoff experience playing in this series. And, for a guy like Holmstrom or Ratte, who, they're European, they're adjusting, especially Ratte, who spent most of the season in Europe. The smaller ice rink size, the more physical style of play, the longer this playoff run goes, the more he gets used to his teammates, the more he gets used to the different angles in the rink, the style of play, speaking English. All of these things are side benefits for Atu Ratte and a lot of the younger players in the Islanders system. So hopefully this will be a positive experience. And look, the Bridgeport Islanders are the 6th seed, and they're going up against the 1 seed, but the season series was even. They've got a veteran goaltender, and I think this Islanders team is going to give them a heck of a fight, all things considered. We have got a lot more to get to on this show. We have our Islanders birthday of the day. It's a goalie from the 2000s. Let's see if you can guess who that is, and some more thoughts about the draft lottery and about the coaching change. So lots more to get to on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Well, Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. You could throw them in your bags, in your kid's backpack, and make sure everyone has fuel that they need for their summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're both healthy and delicious. You don't need to sacrifice delicious food to eat healthy. With Built Bar, you can have both. And all Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. Have you tried the Built Puffs? We are going crazy for Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and churro. Who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? Most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and only 4 net carbs, but they pack 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which has roughly 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. It's time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. We're a couple of days early. If you're listening to this on our regular feed, this is the Wednesday edition of the show. So Friday is going to be the 37th birthday for former Islanders goaltender Jaroslav Halak. Now, Halak, born in Slovakia, in Bratislava, was drafted in the 9th round by the Canadiens back in 2003, made his NHL debut for Montreal back in 06-07, later played for St. Louis and Washington before becoming an Islander in the 2014-2015 season, stayed on the island through 2017-18, then went on for 3 seasons in Boston and spent this year with the Vancouver Canucks. So he is still active. He is a 2-time winner of the Jennings Trophy, which goes to the team that gives up the least number of goals. So, Halak, a steady, consistent goaltender. He's only 5'11", 185, which is not big by modern NHL goaltending standards. But when he was with the Islanders, first of all, he got them to a playoff berth in 2014, 2015. That by far was his best year on the island. 38 wins, a .914 save percentage, and a 2.43 goals against average. We're going to go back and look at one of Jaroslav Halak's better performances with the Islanders, a playoff performance. We take you to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference opening round, a series between the Islanders and the Capitals. This one at the Nassau Coliseum. Islanders come into this game down 3-2 in the series, so it's win and force a 7th game in D.C., lose, and the season is over. And the Islanders, of course, going with Jaroslav Halak. Braden Holtby was the goalie for the Capitals, and it was the Islanders getting on the board first. John Tavares, his second of the playoffs from Ryan Strome and Nick Leddy at 6:56. That made it 1-0 Islanders, but late in the period, Tavares was called for slashing. The Capitals get a power play, and John Carlson scores his first of the playoffs from Alex Ovechkin and Troy Brouwer with 5 seconds left in the period. 1-1 after 20 minutes. No scoring in the second period, but in the third, the Islanders take the lead. Nikolai Kulemin, his first of the playoffs. Nick Leddy and John Tavares with the assists. That made it 2-1 Isles, and then Cal Clutterbuck with an empty net goal, his second of the playoffs, from Johnny Boychuk at 19:07. Johnny Boychuk, that made it 3-1. That's how it ended. The Islanders win it 3-1. 38 saves by our Islanders birthday of the day, Jaroslav Halak. Islanders outshot 39-38 in a pretty open game. And this was, it turned out, the last game at the Nassau Coliseum before the Islanders moved to Brooklyn the following fall. Now, they would come back as a temporary thing, but this ended up being, although no one was sure at the time, the final playoff home game at the original Nassau Coliseum prior to the renovations. So again, happy early birthday to Jaroslav Halak. He will turn 37 on May 13th. He is our Islanders' birthday of the day. The draft lottery, I'll tell you, no surprise, there was better than a 90% chance that the Islanders were not moving up or back in this draft. And now it is up to Lou Lamoriello to maximize that 13th overall pick. Does he trade the pick for immediate help? That's a possibility. Does he, try to take the best player available? Does he move around in the draft, try to trade up for a particular player? All of these are options, and we will be discussing them at length between now and draft day. So we'll keep you up to date on what Lou Lamoriello decides to do. Wouldn't surprise me if he decides to make a trade. It would make sense if this team is looking for immediate help. As for the coaching search, this is key. This is huge. Either this team will bounce back and be tweaked and hopefully return to the form that got them to the conference final the last 2 years, or this era is over. We sort of cut the cord and move on to a new kind of a situation where this team is, going to a rebuild and starting over again. And I'm hoping they can continue their winning ways under the new head coach starting in October. It's going to be a very, very interesting offseason for Islander fans, and we will have it all for you throughout the offseason right here on Locked On Islanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Again, we're here every Monday through Friday, both on all your podcast, wherever you get them, and on YouTube. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.